The very next day, the tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. Jin had decided that the only way to neutralize Jungkook's influence and secure Jimin's future was to tie their family to Namjoon's once and for all. A formal dinner was called. The two worlds collide. The Kim mansion was lit up like a palace, but it felt like a mausoleum. Jin moved through the dining room, adjusting silver forks with surgical precision. He wore a sharp black suit, his face a mask of cold perfection. Jimin, stand straight, Jin commanded. Jimin looked like a porcelain doll in a soft blue blazer, but his eyes were red rimmed. He had been quiet ever since the incident in the music room. Then there was Jungkook. He had been forced in a suit, but he did left the top three buttons of the shirt open, his tattoo speaking out from under his collar like a silent rebellion. He leaned against the wall, looking at the expensive setup with pure disgust. When the doorbell rang, Namjoon's family entered. Namjoon walked in with a warm smile, bringing a sense of grounded peace that Jin lacked. Taehyung followed, looking every bit the handsome hung in a tailored grey suit. His eyes immediately sought out Jungkook, but Jungkook looked away. Jaw clenched. Yoongi was at the back, his head down, his dark hair covering his eyes. He felt like he was walking into a trap. The dinner time. They sat at the long mahogany table. The sitting was intentional. Jin sat Jimin directly across from Taehyung. Jungkook was relegated to the far end next to Yoongi. It's wonderful to have you all here, Jin said, his voice smooth as silk. Namjoon, our families have been the pillars of this city for years. It's only natural we think about the next generation. Namjoon nodded slowly. Though his eyes were observant, he could feel the lightning under the table. Family is the most important thing, Sokjin, but the herd wants what it wants. Jin ignored the hint. He raised his glass. I have been speaking with elders. We believe a formal union, an engagement between Jimin and Taehyung would stabilize both our legacy. It's a perfect match. The sound of a fork hitting a plate echoed like a gunshot. Jimin turned pale, his breath hinging. He looked at Taehyung, then at the floor. Taehyung froze. He looked at Jimin, his friend, someone he respected, but then his eyes drifted to the end of the table. Jungkook was staring at his wine glass, his knuckles white. He felt a physical pain in his chest. He couldn't explain if Taehyung married Jimin, Jungkook would lose both of them. He'd be truly alone in this cold house. While the important people discussed the engagement at the head of the table, a different conversation was happening at the failure end. Yoongi looked at Jungkook. He saw the way Jungkook was looking at Taehyung with a mixture of longing and hatred. And then Yoongi looked at Jimin, who was trembling. It's a gauge, Yoongi whispered, his voice so low only Jungkook could hear. Jungkook looked at the silent music student. What? The golden sun thing, Yoongi said, staring at his untouched food. I watched him at the university. Jimin, he is drowning. My brother is a good man, but he's not the one Jimin is looking for. Jungkook's eyes narrowed. And who is Jimin looking for? A ghost like you? Yuki didn't flinch. He just looked at Jungkook with a sad, knowing smile. At least ghosts don't lie to themselves. You love the president, don't you? And you're going to let him marry your brother just to spite your mother? Jungkook felt like he'd been punched. Shut up, Yugi. I think, Taehyung said, his voice cutting through Jin's planning, that Jimin and I should have a say in this. Jin's smile didn't reach his eyes. Taehyung, you are young. You don't understand that love grows from stability. This is for the best. For whose best? Jungkook suddenly stood up, his chair screeching against the floor. Yours, Yama, or the family's image. Sit down, Jungkook. Jin hissed, his face darkening. No. Jungkook laughed, a bitter, jagged sound. Let's be honest, you're selling Jimin off because you're scared he will end up like me. A mistake. He want to lock him in a golden cage before he realizes the world is bigger than your lecture hall. Jungkook, please, Jimin whispered, tears finally falling. Don't, please me, Jimin. Jungkook turned, his fire on his brother. Stop being his puppet. Tell them you don't want this. Tell them you are tired of being the golden boy or good boy. The room went silent. Jin stood up, his hand trembling with rage. Get out, get out of this house, Jungkook, now. Jungkook didn't wait. He grabbed his leather jacket and stormed out. Taehyung stood up to follow him, but Namjoon put a firm hand on his son's arm, shaking his head. Not yet. In the chaos, no one noticed Yoongi staring at Jimin. For 1 second their eyes met. Jin saw the intense, silent pain in Yoongi's gaze, a mirror of his son. It was the first time Jimin truly saw the boy from the music room.
The rain from the previous night had returned, turning the industrial district into a maze of slag, asphalt, and neon reflections. Taehyung drove like a man possessed. His mind was a storm of Jin's cold declarations. The look of pure, shattered glass in Jungkook's eyes before he stormed out. When he reached the warehouse, the Ducati was parked haphazardly out front, tilted as if it had been dropped rather than placed. The heavy metal door was slightly ajar. Taehyung stepped outside, the smell of oil and damp earth hitting him instantly. But there was a new sound, the rhythmic, violent thud of a fist hitting a canvas. Jungkook wasn't working on his bike. He was standing in front of his paintings, his knuckles raw and bleeding, frantically slashing black paint across a portrait of a face that looked hauntingly like his own. Jungkook, stop! Taehyung shouted, rushing forward.
Jungkook swung around, his face a mess of sweat, rain, and tears he refused to let fall. He looked feral. Get out! Go back to your engagement party, President. Go be the perfect son for my perfect mother. Taehyung didn't stop. He stepped right into Jungkook's personal space, grabbing his wrist. Jungkook struggled, his strength immense, but Taehyung didn't budge. I'm not marrying him, Jungkook. I'm not doing it. Jungkook froze. His chest was heavy. You have to. If you don't, Jin will ruin him. He will take away everything Jimin loves. He will make him a ghost. Then we fight him, Taehyung said, his voice dropping to a low friend's whisper. But I won't do it by pretending to love someone else while I am looking for you in every room I walk into. The silence that followed was heavy. The bad boy mask didn't slip, it disintegrated. Jungkook's knees gave out, and he slammed against Taehyung's chest. Taehyung held him, the expensive cashmere of his suit soaking up the grease and the salt of Jungkook's silent sobs. I'm a mistake, Taehyung. Jungkook shocked out. He told me I was born from a betrayal. I'm not even supposed to be here. Taehyung pulled back just enough to cup Jungkook's face, his thumbs wiping away the grin. Yeah, you aren't a mistake. You're the only person in that house who is actually alive, and I'm not letting you go back into the dark alone. Meanwhile, the balcony. While the warehouse was a scene of raw fire, the Kim mansion was a scene of cold moonlight. Jimin was standing on his balcony, looking out at the city. The engagement ring Jin had given him to look at sat on the stone railing like a lead weight. It's too heavy for you, isn't it? Jimin gasped, turning around. Hyungi was standing on the neighboring balcony, which belonged to the guest wing, where Namjoon's family was staying for the night. Hyungi was wearing a simple black hoodie, looking small and unassuming. The ring, Hyungi said, gesturing with a tilt of his head. It looks like a shackle. Jimin wiped his eyes quickly. It's my duty. My mother, he's done so much for me.
Yoongi stepped closer to the edge of his balcony, the gap between them only a few feet. For the first time, he didn't look away. Duty is a slow way to die, Jimin. I spend my days writing music that no one hears because I'm afraid of my own voice. You spend your days being a masterpiece for a man who doesn't even see the real you. Jimin looked at Yoongi, really looked at him. He saw the sharp, cat-like eyes that were full of a terrifying amount of understanding. Why are you telling me this? Because, Yoongi said, his voice cracking slightly. I have been a ghost for a long time, and I hate seeing someone as beautiful as you start to fade away too. Yoongi reached out his hand across the gap. He didn't touch Jimin, but the gesture was an invitation.
Jimin looked at the hand, then back at the ring on the railing. For the first time in his life, the golden sun felt a spark of true rebellion.
Back at the warehouse, Jungkook had finally calmed down. He was sitting on a crate, and his hand bandaged with a stripe of Taehyung's expensive shirt. Jin won't let this go, Jungkook warned. He will use every bit of power he has. He will use your father's reputation against you. Taehyung looked at the ruined paintings, then at the boy who had created them. My father is a man of peace, but he is not a man of silence. If we tell him the truth about Jin, about how you are treated, he will stand with us. And Jimin? Jungkook asked softly. Jimin is stronger than you think. Taehyung replied. He just needs someone to show him that he is allowed to choose.
Unbeknownst to them, the choice was already being made. In the mansion, Jimin had stepped away from the ring, leaving it cold and lonely on the stone. As he stayed on the balcony talking to the silent boy from the music room until the sun began to rise.
The morning sun didn't bring warmth to the Kim mansion. It brought a cold, clinical light that exposed every crack in the family's foundation. Jin was up before anyone else. He was a man of habit, and his morning ritual involved a cup of black tea and a walk through the garden to clear his mind for his lectures. But as he stepped onto the veranda, his eyes caught a glint of silver on the stone railing of Jimin's balcony. He walked over, his footstep echoing in the morning silence. There it was, the diamond engagement ring, sitting alone in the dew, rejected. Jin didn't scream. He didn't break anything. He simply picked up the ring, his face turning a shade of pale that was almost grey. His hands, usually so steady, trembled as he realized for the first time that his golden sun had finally found a spine. When the families gathered for breakfast, the atmosphere was suffocating. Namjoon sat calmly sipping his coffee, sensing the tectonic plates of the family shifting. Taehyung arrived last, his clothes slightly wrinkled, his eyes tired but burning with a new kind of fire. Jin stood at the head of the table. He didn't sit down. He tossed the ring onto the center of the table. It skittered across the wood and stopped right in front of Jimin's plate. I found this outside, Jin said, his voice a low, vibrating hum of hurry. Care to explain, Jimin? Jimin looked at the ring. Then he looked up. Beside him, Yoongi shifted in his seat, his hands moving under the table, not to touch Jimin, but to let him know he was there. I can't wear it, Amma, Jimin said, his voice surprisingly clear. Because I don't love Taehyung like that, and he doesn't love me. Jin's gaze snapped to Taehyung. Is that so? After everything I have done to secure your future? You didn't do this for our future, Professor, James said, standing up to stand behind Jimin's chair. You did it to build a wall around your own insecurities. You want to lock us into a life where we only exist to make you look good. The arrival of the failure. Before Jin could respond, the heavy front doors swung open. Jungkook walked in. He wasn't wearing the suit from the last night. He was back in his black jeans and a t-shirt, stained with a bit of paint. He looked exhausted, but for the first time, he didn't look like he was hiding. He walked straight to the table and stood next to Taehyung. I'm moving out. Jungkook said, no yelling, no drama, just a fact. I'm taking my paintings and my bike, and I'm taking the truth with me. Jin laughed, a bitter, sharp sound. With what money? You have nothing. You are nothing without this name.
He has a voice. A new voice interrupted. It was Namjoon. He stood up, looking at Jin with deep, disappointed sadness. Jin, I have watched you turn your home into a courtroom for years. You have been judging these boys for crimes they didn't commit. My son Taehyung told me everything last night. Namjoon looked at Jungkook and smiled, a real fatherly smile. I have seen your sketches, Jungkook. My son showed me. You have a talent that doesn't need a Kim legacy to thrive. If you need a place to stay while you set up your own gallery, my doors are open.
Jin felt the world spinning. His perfect match was ruined. His failure son was being offered a hand by the men he respected most. And his golden son was looking at him with pity instead of fear. You're all insane, Jin hissed, his eyes landing on Jungkook. You think you can just leave? You think the world will forget who you are? You were born from a man who cheated and lied. Jungkook, it's in your blood. Maybe, Jungkook said, stepping closer to Jin. But you're the one who chose to act like him. You're the one who lied to us about what love looks like. Jimin is good because he's kind, not because he obeys you. And I am bad because I refuse to let you break him. Jungkook turned to Jimin. Are you coming, Hyun? Jimin looked at the ring on the table, then at Jin's cold, lonely face. Then he looked at Yoongi, who were watching him with bated breath. Jimin stood up. He didn't take the ring. He didn't even take his bag. I will be at the music wing if you need me, Emma. I have a song to finish with someone. As the three of them, Taehyung, Jungkook and Jimin walked out of the mansion, the air felt lighter. They stood by the gates of the university. Jimin walked towards the music wing, where he knew Yoongi would be waiting in the shadows of the piano room. Taehyung and Jungkook stood by the Ducati. So, Jungkook said, looking at the campus, where everyone still thought he was a rich brat. What now, President? Your reputation is officially trashed. Taehyung leaned against the bike, pulling Jungkook close by the waist, ignoring the students who were staring in shock. I think President is a boring title anyway. I'd much rather be the guy who dates the genius artist. Jungkook smiled, a real, dazzling smile that reached his eyes. You're still an idiot, Taehyung. Yeah, Taehyung whispered, leaning in, but I am your idiot. The music wing was always the quietest part of the university, but today the silence felt different. It felt like a battered breath. Yoongi sat at the grand piano in room 402, the same room where he had pushed Jimin away just days before. His fingers weren't playing a melody. They were just resting on the keys, trembling slightly. The news of the cancelled engagement and the blowout at the Kim mansion had travelled through the campus like wildfire. The door cracked open. Yoongi didn't have to look up to know who it was. He knew it the soft rhythm of those footsteps. Jimin stepped into the room, no longer wearing the stiff, expensive blazer Jin favored. He was in simple, oversized sweater, looking smaller but somehow much more solid. You said I had a song to finish, Jimin said softly, closing the door behind him. But I don't know the notes. Yoongi finally looked up. His cat-like eyes were full of a raw, terrifying vulnerability. I have been writing them for 2 years, Jimin. I just never had the courage to play them for you. The shadow steps forward. Jimin walked over to the piano, standing right next to Yoongi. Why? Why did you hide? I spent so much time in this hallway just hoping you'd look at me. Yoongi let out a shaky breath, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. Look at you, Jimin. You're the sun. You're everything everyone wants to be. And look at me, I am the guy who sits in the dark because I'm afraid my own shadow will disappoint people. I thought if I spoke to you, you did realize I wasn't as beautiful as the music I play. Jimin reached out. This time he didn't wait for Yoongi to move. He placed his hand over Yoongi's on the keys. The music is beautiful because it's you, Yoongi. I don't want a prince. I had a prince arranged for me and it felt like a prison. I want the person who hears my silence. I want the person who stayed in the rain just to make sure I got home safe. Yoongi froze. You saw me? I always saw you, Jimin whispered. Yoongi stood up, his heart thumping, a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He was taller than Jimin, but in this moment, he felt like he was looking up at a giant. I don't have a perfect life to offer you, Yoongi said, his voice dropping to a rasp. I'm moody, I'm insecure, and I spend too much time inside my own head. But if you will have me, every song I write from now on will have your name in the margins. Jimin smiled, and it was like the sun finally rose in that dusty music room. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against Yoongi's. Then start playing, Yoongi. I'm listening. Yoongi didn't go back to the piano. Instead, he reached out, his hands finally finding their home and around Jimin's waist. He leaned in, his eyes fluttering shut, and kissed Jimin. It wasn't a movie kiss. It was hesitant, a bit desperate, and tasted like the end of a long, lonely winter. After 6 months, an art gallery. Inside the walls were covered in the paintings Jungkook had once hidden. They weren't rich art, they were visceral, powerful and honest. Jungkook stood in the center of the room, wearing a clean black shirt, his tattoos on full display. He wasn't speaking anymore. He was talking to a critic, his voice steady and confident. Taehyung was by his side, acting as the manager, his hand resting proudly on the small of Jungkook's back. He had stepped down as college president to pursue a career in art curation. They were the talk of the town, not as a perfect match, but as a power couple who had built their own empire out of the scrap metal of their past. In the corner of the gallery, a small stage was set up. Yoongi sat at a sleek black piano, playing a bright, up-tempo jazz piece. And beside him, Jimin was laughing, holding a glass of champagne, no longer a golden sun, but a man who danced whenever he felt like it. Jin wasn't there. He was still in his mansion, still a professor. But his house was silent. Had kept his reputation, but he had lost his family. As the sun set, the four of them stood together at the entrance of the gallery. To the failures, Jungkook said, raising his glass with a wink. To the truth, Taehyung corrected, pulling him into for a kiss as the camera flashes went off, capturing a moment that was finally perfectly real. The lights of the gallery had finally dimmed. The critics had gone home. The wine bottles were empty, and the Cook and Re sign was glowing softly against the brick wall. Inside, the space was quiet, smelling of fresh oil paint and Taehyung's expensive citrus collagen. Jungkook was sitting on the floor in the middle of the room, leaning his back against the base of his favorite sculpture. He looked exhausted, his hair tousled, and his sleeves rolled up, revealing the ink on his arms that he used to hide. Tim walked over, carrying 2 paper cups of cheap convenience store coffee, a far cry for the porcelain tea sets of their past. He sat down cross-legged in front of Jungkook, handing him a cup. "You did it, Cook," Tim whispered, his eyes scanning the room. The rich part just become the most talked about artist and soul, and not one person asked about your last name tonight. Jungkook took a sip of the coffee, a small, tired smile tugging at his lips. "They didn't ask because you wouldn't let them. I saw you defending my vision to the grumpy old critic for 20 minutes. Taehyung shrugged. His eyes softened. "I wasn't defending your vision. I was defending the man I love. There's a difference." Jungkook reached out, his grease-stained thumb tracing the line of Taehyung's jaw. "You lost a lot for this, Tae. You could have been anything, a politician, a CEO. You could have had the easiest life in the world." Taehyung leaned into the touch, closing his eyes. "I was those things, Jungkook. I was a president and a golden child. I was bored to death. I'd rather be here, on a dusty floor with a man who actually knows how to feel something, than in a palace with people who only know how to bow." Jungkook pulled Taehyung closer, resting his forehead against his. The silence between them wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of Jin's dinner table. It was a comfortable, living thing. "One more thing," Jungkook whispered, pulling a set of keys from his pocket. "The bike is gassed up. The city is empty. You want to go?" Taehyung grinned, that boxy, handsome hung smile that used to be for the cameras, but was now only for Jungkook. "I thought you did never ask." A few minutes later, the roar of the Ducati echoed through the empty streets of the arts district. Jungkook was at the handles, leaning forward, and Taehyung was behind him, his arms wrapped tight around Jungkook's waist, his face pressed into the leather of his jacket. They weren't running away from anything anymore. They were just moving forward. Behind them, the Kim mansion was a dark, distant memory. Ahead of them, the sun was just beginning to hint at a new day over the Han River, a day where they didn't have to be perfect, they didn't have to be bad. They just had to be theirs.